Imagine a young man walking into a courtroom the way some people wander into their own kitchen. No pause, no respect, certain nothing inside can touch him. Less than a minute later, with the judge on the bench and the flag behind him, that same hand drifts up and his middle finger hangs in the air for the camera on his phone. Before he came in, it was a morning in Providence traffic court. Parking tickets, tow fees, people in worn shoes holding thin envelopes. In the front row, an elderly woman in a faded blue coat sat with her citation folded into a tiny square. Beside her, a gray-haired veteran held his cap on his knees. On the bench, Judge Caprio listened to a woman explain how she'd overstayed amateur outside the clinic. His tone was steady and human. You came in, told your story, he weighed it, you went back to your day. Then the side door clicked open. The young man didn't hurry, early 20s, designer hoodie, spotless sneakers, on-earbud in, eyes locked on his phone as he crossed the back of the room like it was a hotel lobby. "Sir, you need to check in at the desk," the clerk called. He didn't move toward her. Without looking up, he traced a small circle in the air with 2 fingers, as if waving off a waiter. "You've got my name," he said. "Just mark me here." The woman in blue lowered her eyes. Judge Caprio's pen halted. The woman at the podium fell silent. The judge turned toward the back of the room, watching. "Sir?" The clerk tried again, softer. "You need to come up and sign in." His sigh carried to the last row. He walked forward, shoulders loose, every step saying this was beneath him. At the rail, he kept the earbud in and never met the clerk's eyes. Instead, he tilted the phone so the camera caught his face and the seal of the court behind him. "Live from traffic court," he murmured into the screen. Then his hand came up. Wrist slack, eyes still on the phone, he raised his middle finger. Not aimed at the judge, not at anyone in particular, just hanging in the shared air. A crude signal for whoever might watch later. The veteran turned, voice low but steady. "Young man," he said, "you don't act like that in here." For the first time, the kid looked around. His gaze slid over the benches and settled on the older man. "Relax," he said. "I know where I am. I don't stand in line behind pension checks." A murmur rolled through the room. The elderly woman hugged her coat closer, the folded ticket trembling in her hand. The clerk leaned toward the bench, speaking just above a whisper. "Judge," she said, "that's Daniel Harrow. His father runs Meridian Pharma. They're all over the news. Federal investigation, hearings, everything." For a beat, nothing moved. Judge Caprio didn't reach for the gavel. He folded his hands and looked at the young man with a calm so complete it felt like the air before a storm. "Mr. Harrow," he said quietly, "put the phone down and come forward." The smirk on the young man's face twitched. Everyone else in that courtroom already knew. This had stopped being about a parking ticket. He stepped up to the podium with the same restless swagger, but the edge in his movements wasn't as sharp as before. The phone was finally in his pocket, the imprint of where it had been still clung to his posture, like someone stripped of the only shield he trusted. Judge Caprio asked for his full name. "Daniel Harrow," he replied, chin raised, as if expecting a reaction simply from the sound of it. The room reacted anyway. A few whispers fluttered through the rows. Not loud, but mistakable. One student nudged another. The elderly woman stiffened. A man in the back muttered, "That family?" Daniel caught all of it. His smirk returned, but it was thinner this time, more practiced than confident. The judge continued with the routine questions. Address, employer. "Meridian Pharma," Daniel said, tapping his nail against the podium. "I'm technically listed as a junior consultant." The way he said listed carried the truth. He didn't consult on anything. Judge Caprio didn't comment. He simply wrote it down, his pen moving with controlled patience. Daniel shifted his weight, bouncing his heel against the floor. He was pretending to obey board, but his eyes never stayed in one place more than a second. They darted to the audience, then the clock, then his pocket. The facade of indifference frayed at the edges. "You understand why you're here today?" the judge asked. "It's a parking thing," Daniel answered, "which honestly I don't have time for. I'm flying out tomorrow morning." A few people exchanged incredulous glances. The veteran exhaled through his nose. Someone in the third row whispered, "Of course he is." Judge Caprio rested his elbows on the bench. "This court handles each case in its time, Mr. Harrow. You're not an exception." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. The judge looked down at the citation. The vehicle was parked in a handicapped zone. Who was driving the car? "Not me," Daniel said quickly. "My driver handles that." Before the judge could respond, a quiet voice drifted in from the hallway. "That's not true." Heads turned. The courtroom door opened wider, and a man in a dark jacket stepped inside. Middle-aged, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes lowered, with a mixture of fear and resolve. It was the driver. Daniel's expression froze, the first real crack in his armor. "What are you doing?" he hissed. The driver swallowed hard. "Telling the truth, sir." Judge Caprio motioned him forward. "Come stand where I can hear you." The man obeyed, though his steps were careful, like each one needed permission. His hands trembled as he spoke. "Mr. Harrow told me to let him drive. I said the spot was restricted." He laughed. "Told me to pay the ticket myself if I cared so much." A long silence stretched across the room. Daniel tried to interrupt. "He misunderstood." "He didn't," the driver said softly. Even Daniel's breathing changed. Too quick, then too deep, searching for the old rhythm of defiance that wouldn't come back. Judge Caprio folded the citation and set it aside. His tone remained steady, but something sharper flickered behind it. "Mr. Harrow, lying to the court is more serious than a parking violation." Daniel didn't answer. His fingers tapped the podium, frantic and uneven. The judge leaned back. "Where is your father today?" No answer again. Just a small shift in Daniel's stance, the kind of shift that reveals more than any words. The driver offered it quietly. "He sent me with him, said he couldn't come." It hung in the air, the absence of the man who always fixed things for his son, who always shielded him, who wasn't here now. Judge Caprio studied Daniel for a long moment. What he saw wasn't just arrogance. It was a young man holding up a mask that weighed more than he could manage, terrified of the moment someone might name the truth. The driver's voice had barely faded when Judge Caprio motioned him a step closer. The courtroom shifted around them. People leaning forward without meaning to, as if the air itself had tightened. "Sir," the judge said to the driver, "I need you to state clearly what happened." The man clasped his hands together. "I told him the space was reserved for disabled drivers. He said it didn't matter. He took the keys and, well, he parked there anyway." Daniel's shoulders jerked back, like someone had pulled a thread from his spine. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "He's twisting it." The judge lifted a hand, not to silence but to steady the room. His glance toward the clerk was subtle, and within seconds she had a screen turned toward him, loading the footage from the street camera near the lot. The recording flickered to life. There, in grainy winter sunlight, was Daniel stepping out of the driver's side, sunglasses on, voice sharp and dismissive as he waved off the driver. The disabled zone markings were unmistakable. The judge didn't speak. He didn't need to. Daniel leaned closer to the screen, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "The angle is terrible. You can't even see?" "You're the only person in that video," the judge said calmly. Silence layered over silence. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to dim. From the second row, the elderly woman in the blue coat slowly raised her hand. Her voice cracked when she spoke, but every word reached the front. That was my spot. I sat in my car for 5 minutes waiting for someone to move. My husband can't walk far anymore, and I had to drive around the block twice so he wouldn't stumble. Daniel turned toward her, startled, not by her accusation, but by the rawness in her tone, the kind of rawness you can't argue with. "I didn't see you," he said, but the sentence felt limp, without conviction. "You didn't?" "Look," she replied softly. A quiet ripple traveled through the room. An exhale from someone. A soft shake of the head from someone else. The veteran set his cap on the bench beside him, jaw clenched. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his hands folded. "Mr. Harrow, one more question." Daniel braced himself. "When I came into the courtroom this morning—" "Why were you laughing?" Daniel blinked, searching for footing that wasn't there. "Because it's a traffic ticket. Because this whole thing is blown out of proportion." The judge's reply came slowly, each word set down like a weight. "No, it's not blown out of proportion. It's small, and yet it matters. It matters because people matter." Daniel swallowed, eyes flicking toward the door. The old confidence wasn't returning. Something else had taken its place. Not humility, but the first uneasy awareness that the room saw him fully, without filters, without excuses. The judge continued, "You treated a disabled parking space as disposable. You treated your driver as replaceable. You treated this court as entertainment." Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came. "And that," the judge said quietly, "has nothing to do with a ticket. That has to do with who you choose to be when no one is watching." The room stayed perfectly still. Even Daniel had stopped moving, as if he'd only just realized the moment he was in. The moment where the story he'd carried about himself no longer matched the truth laid bare in front of strangers. The shifting of that truth, the cracking of it, was the first real tremor in a long day that had only just begun. Judge Caprio let the silence settle until every rustle in the courtroom faded. Only then did he reach for the file the clerk had placed beside him earlier, a thin stack of papers Daniel had barely glanced at when he arrived. "Mr. Harrow," the judge said, tapping the corner of the folder, "these are the documents your attorney submitted last week. I'd like to confirm one detail." Daniel straightened, trying to rebuild the armor he'd been losing piece by piece. "They're standard. My lawyer handles everything." "That much is clear," the judge replied. "But I doubt your lawyer intended to hide this from you." He slid one page forward. The header read, "Meridian Hope Foundation Vehicle Registry." "This car," the judge continued, "is registered to a charitable fund, your family's fund." Daniel's brows tightened. "It's my dad's. He puts everything under that umbrella, tax reasons." "That may be true," Caprio said, "but the stated purpose of this particular vehicle is not ambiguous." He read aloud, voice steady. "Designated for the transport of medical supplies and essential kits for elderly patients and individuals with chronic illnesses." A hush, deeper than before, fell across the room. The contrast was brutal. The car meant to deliver help had instead stolen a disabled parking space from a woman who needed it. For the first time, Daniel's bravado didn't just slip, it wavered. His eyes lowered, then flicked up again as if searching for a place to land. Before he could speak, the elderly woman in the blue coat rose slowly from her seat. Her hands shook, but her tone carried a sharp, painful clarity. "I know that foundation," she said. "My husband applied for assistance last year. They said someone would come, but no one ever did." She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She simply delivered the sentence like a fact carved from stone. "My husband passed away in March," she added. "He only needed help for a little while." Daniel froze. His throat moved, but his voice failed him. A few people in the room turned toward her, not with pity, but with the weight of her loss pressing into them. The veteran lowered his eyes. The young students stopped fidgeting. Even the clerk swallowed hard. Judge Caprio spoke gently. "Ma'am, thank you." He shifted back to Daniel. "Did you know this was the vehicle meant for that program?" A beat, then another. Daniel tried to hold the silence together, but the truth cracked through the seams of his posture. "Yeah," he finally muttered. "I knew. It was not defiance. It was resignation. And you used it for what? Errands? Parties?" the judge asked. Daniel's jaw twitched. "It's my family's car." "Incorrect," Caprio said softly. "It belongs to the people it was meant to serve." Something in the room snapped from tension into indignation. Then came another voice, hesitant but firm, from the center row. "Judge," a middle-aged man said, "Meridian's supposed to bring weekly kits to my mother's nursing facility. They haven't shown up in months." Daniel whipped around, startled. "I don't run the company." "No," the judge agreed, "but you benefit from everything it provides. And today, you misused a vehicle meant for vulnerable people. You misused the trust behind it." Daniel's breath quickened. His fingers curled on the podium, not in anger, but in a defensive tremor he couldn't hide. Finally, cornered between evidence and conscience, he snapped. Not loudly, but sharply. "I'm not responsible for sick people. I didn't create their problems." A wave of disbelief swept the room. A woman gasped. Someone whispered, "Good Lord." The judge's face didn't harden. It softened, which somehow made the pressure even heavier. "Mr. Harrow," he said, "responsibility isn't about causing someone suffering. It's about whether you make it better or worse." Daniel stared at the floor, his breath coming in uneven bursts. "We're not speaking about a parking ticket anymore," Caprio continued. "We are speaking about what you chose to do with something meant to help others, and what that choice reveals." The room held its breath. This was no longer the downfall of a spoiled young man. It was the unveiling of a truth he had run from for years. A truth now standing in the center of a courtroom filled with people who saw him, maybe for the first time, without the shield of his name. Judge Caprio didn't speak right away. He leaned back slightly, hands folded, eyes fixed on Daniel with a calmness that felt almost surgical. The courtroom, moments earlier tight with anger, now seemed suspended, as if everyone braced for the verdict, but wasn't prepared for what would come before it. When the judge finally opened his mouth, his voice was barely above a murmur. "Mr. Harrow, sit up straight." Daniel obeyed before he realized he had. Something in the judge's tone bypassed his defenses. Caprio continued, "You've heard a lot this morning. Not accusations, experiences. Real people, real consequences." Daniel's jaw moved, as if he were chewing on a reply, but nothing formed. Then, unexpectedly, the judge shifted his gaze away from Daniel and toward the elderly woman in the blue coat. "Ma'am," he said gently, "if you're willing, I'd like to know what you would say to this young man." The room turned toward her like a tide. She stood slowly, bracing herself with one hand on the bench. When she looked at Daniel, there was no anger, only a tired softness, the kind born from too much loss and too little justice. "I don't want him punished," she said. "That won't bring my husband back, and it won't fix his heart." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. "I just want him to understand something. Someday he'll be old too. Someday he'll need someone to care. And when that day comes, He'll wish he had given more kindness while he had the chance. Her words were not an attack. They were a mirror. And Daniel flinched as if he didn't like the reflection. A shaky breath escaped him. His eyes rimmed red. And even he seemed surprised by it. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he whispered. "I didn't know?" Judge Caprio raised a hand, stopping him without force. "No? You knew? You just didn't think beyond yourself." The tremor in Daniel's chest deepened, as if something inside him had come loose and he didn't know how to hold it. The judge leaned forward. "Let me tell you something about this city. Providence doesn't measure a person by their name or by their money. We measure you by the way you treat people who cannot return the favor." He paused, letting the words sink, letting them settle into the quiet corners of the room. That parking space wasn't about convenience. It was about respect. For people who can't walk far. For people who depend on others. For people like this woman's husband. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. Caprio continued, voice steady but carrying a gravity that pressed into every listener. "And what troubles me most, Mr. Harrow, is that you saw no value in any of them." Daniel blinked fast, looking down. A single drop hit the podium, and he flinched as if ashamed of it. The judge exhaled, then finally announced his decision. "For the violation itself, the fine stands, but that is not your sentence." The courtroom went absolutely silent. "You will complete 40 hours of community service," Caprio said, "not sweeping sidewalks or moving boxes. You will work at the Elmwood Senior Center, serving meals, delivering kits, speaking with the people your family's foundation was created to help." A stir moved through the room, but no one objected. Caprio's voice dropped lower, cutting through the tension like a slow blade. "I am not punishing you for parking illegally, Mr. Harrow. I am punishing you for indifference. Indifference is a quiet poison. It kills slowly, but it kills everything it touches." Daniel's breathing hitched. This time he didn't look away. He looked directly at the judge, and the bravado was gone, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. Then, in a voice small but honest, he said, "I would like to speak to the lady. After this, if she'll let me." The judge nodded once, a gesture neither approving nor soft. Simply acknowledging a step. "That is between you and her," Caprio said, "not the court." The moment hung in the air, heavy and fragile, the kind that doesn't resolve anything fully, but marks a beginning no one expected when the day started. The gavel never struck. Judge Caprio simply announced a recess, and the murmurs began as people rose from the benches. But no one hurried to the door. They stood in small clusters, or lingered in their seats, as if some invisible thread held them there. Curiosity, perhaps, or the quiet hope of witnessing something rare. Daniel didn't move at first. He stayed at the podium with both hands flat on the wood, breathing slowly, as if he had to relearn how. The courtroom emptied halfway before he finally turned, searching for the woman in the blue coat. She hadn't left. She stood near the aisle, her purse clutched against her ribs, watching him with steady eyes that held neither fear nor judgment, only patience. Daniel approached like someone stepping off a high ledge. Without his phone, without the attitude, he looked younger than he had all morning. His voice cracked, and he swallowed. "I'm sorry for what happened outside, for taking that space, for everything you said your husband went through." The woman studied him closely, as if deciding whether to believe him. Then she laid a light hand on his sleeve, a gesture so simple it disarmed him completely. "Just remember," she said quietly, "don't take from others what you don't truly need. Most of us get through life because strangers show kindness, Try being one of those strangers. Daniel nodded, eyes lowered. A tremor moved through him. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just the unmistakable shake of someone finally letting go of the last piece of a heavy mask. Near the benches, the veteran watched them with a softened expression. A couple of students exchanged a glance that wasn't cynical for once. A middle-aged woman dabbed her cheek. No applause, no approval, just a shared understanding that something had shifted. When Daniel stepped into the hallway, his driver rose from the bench where he had been waiting like someone bracing for punishment. "Sir," the driver said, "your father called. He wants to know why you're still here." For the first time that day, Daniel didn't flinch at his father's name. He took a slow breath, turned toward the door, and said, "Tell him I was doing something for myself, not him." The driver blinked, uncertain, but Daniel's tone held a quiet resolve. Thin, new, but unmistakably real. Back inside, the clerk was gathering files. Judge Caprio stood alone in the front of the courtroom, looking at the empty seats the way some men look at old photographs. The judge didn't speak until the clerk came close. "Strange morning?" she said gently. He smiled faintly. "Not strange, just human." He rested his hand on the bench, fingers brushing the worn wood. "If people took one honest step each day," he murmured, half to her, half to the room, "we'd have far fewer cases and a far kinder world." The clerk didn't answer. She didn't have to. The judge's words lingered in the stillness, filling the quiet spaces left behind by all who had walked out. A truth without fanfare, without banners, but one that settled like a steady weight on the heart. And somewhere down the hallway, Daniel Harrow paused before the exit, looked back once, and stepped outside into the cold air, carrying, for the first time in a long time, something heavier than privilege and lighter than shame. A single new beginning, wrapped in silence, and enough.